Hello everybody and welcome to a guide on playing every survivor in Risk of Rain 2. Hover over the video or go into the description below if you're looking for a specific survivor. Otherwise, let's begin here with a few general tips that apply regardless of who you're playing. First, always stay on the move. Get in the habit of continually circling or strafing back and forth while keeping enemies directly in front of you. Sprinting and jumping are both huge components in dodging enemies, so make sure you are doing both on a regular basis, especially sprinting. In fact, just get in the habit of pressing your sprint key after every action you perform. Second, target priority. You need to focus down the biggest threats to your run first, otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed and die. Obviously, the more you play, the more experience you'll have in determining which enemies are actually the threats, but as a general rule of thumb, you should prioritize golems, lesser wisps, blind pests, and elder lemurians, as well as any boss and or elite monsters. Third, and finally, be conscious of your time. Risk of Rain 2 is all about getting the most amount of loot in the least amount of time. As with target priority, you'll simply need to play more to get a better understanding of finding the teleporter, choosing the optimal looting path, deciding when to leave, etc. But a good time to shoot for is about 5 to 7 minutes per stage. This will give you plenty of time to scout for loot, pick up a few things, hit the teleporter, and then grab a few more things on your way out. Remember that you do not need every item on a stage, especially if doing so would add another minute or two to the clock. Speaking of items, let's quickly go over some specific items that stand out regardless of who you play. Delicate watches give you an absolutely crazy amount of damage, but with the risk of breaking into a completely useless form. Goat hooves grant additional speed at all times, not just while sprinting. ATG missiles and double bands are the bread and butter source of your single target damage in any run. The ukulele is essential for your proc chains to occur, which proc chains are how you deal ludicrous levels of damage. And finally, a single hopu feather and wax quail will skyrocket your mobility and thus your overall survivability. Alright, with all of the general stuff out of the way, let's begin with the survivor specific tips. Note that whatever I say here, simply play whoever you want to play. You can and will get good runs on any survivor that you choose. Starting with Acrid, his runs have high consistency. This is due in large part to his poison, which deals 1% of an enemy's max HP every single second. You can easily poison an entire map by just using one or two abilities, and at all other times you'll just be running around laughing maniacally as you watch HP bars get lower and lower and lower and lower. Outside of the first few stages, you shouldn't even bother going into melee range, as your secondary abilities cooldown is so short that you can constantly just spam it, and again, poison will do everything else. Focus on grabbing early movement speed, as the majority of your run will be spent running in circles, not necessarily hitting things, so the easier dodging things becomes, the better your run will turn out. And if that gets a bit boring, you can always grab a Visions of Heresy to replace your melee attack with a ranged one, enabling a much more active playstyle. Next, Artificer. Her runs have medium consistency. The Artificer is all about having quick bursts of damage rather than one continual stream. Similar to Acrid's playstyle, you'll use an ability or two and then proceed to run around while waiting for them to come back off of cooldown. The new Ignition Tank green item aids in those downtime periods, as it makes the burn from your primary attack much more potent and transforms the ability from a lesser wisp killer into an everything but a boss one instead. And again, make sure you're pressing that sprint key after everything but your flamethrower. This is especially important when using your ice wall, as the wall will be instantly placed rather than almost a second after. Next, Bandit. His runs have high consistency. Guaranteed crits, anybody? If you're struggling on Bandit, I can almost guarantee it's because you're not utilizing his backstab passive enough. When I say you want to be behind a monster as much as possible, I mean you better get behind that monster right the heck now. But really, getting double damage right off the bat and having his special deal up to 3 times more damage to lower the target's health, yeah, Bandit doesn't have too many threats throughout his runs. If you need extra height, be sure to cast your utility while you are airborne, as you'll receive an extra jump's worth of height from both the beginning and the end of the smoke. Also, if you're struggling to hit distant enemies, try double tapping your primary, waiting a brief second for the bloom to reset, and then double tapping the remaining 2 shots. You'll also want some early movement speed, as it makes getting behind things for your backstabs much more consistent. Next, Captain. His runs have high consistency. Not much to say here, just spam your shotgun as much as humanly possible. Using your hacking beacon sooner rather than later into a stage will give you more value, as the longer you remain on a stage, the more money you'll have and the less impactful getting a couple things for free becomes. After all, how often do you leave a stage with exactly 0 gold remaining? Not very, I'm guessing. Anything that synergizes well with hitting things a bunch is what you want on the Captain. A little bit of bleed with a little bit of attack speed can go a long way. Next, Commando. His runs have medium consistency. Commando is also a primary attack machine, but unlike the Captain, doesn't have any utility or burst damage to back it up. This makes the Shuriken an absolute godsend of an item, as it gives you a reliable way to proc your ice and fire bands, giving you that much needed burst damage for the tankier foes. Also, being close, and I mean close to enemies, will net you the best results, as you'll experience up to a 50% damage penalty if you're even just a medium distance away. Use your phase blast whenever it's off cooldown, prioritizing it directly after your suppressive fire finishes, and otherwise sit back and hold that left mouse button down. Next, Engineer. His runs have medium consistency. Engineer's turrets are his best friends, yes, but you shouldn't have to rely on them for everything. Thermal harpoons are a great tool for taking out squishy and tanky enemies alike. Be sure to charge up your primary attack while waiting for your other cooldowns to finish, and remember to charge it while sprinting. Regardless of which turrets you take, they are going to be a powerhouse at every point in the run, so long as you don't plop them down in the middle of a pack of blazing Lemurians or on top of an imp overlord. Engineer's biggest downside is easily getting swarmed if too many things are left unchecked for too long, but this downside is heavily mitigated once you get just a couple mobility items. Next, Huntress. Her runs have high consistency. While she doesn't dish out the most damage, she does dish out the most consistent damage. This is due to her primary having auto aim and the ability to fire it while sprinting. You should always be hitting something while playing the Huntress. The thing is that something isn't always the thing you want to be hitting, which is where your ballista comes in. Her mobility, however, especially while fighting enemies, is off the charts, and as soon as you can supplement that with a few damage items, you'll be slipping and sliding through the runs like they're butter. Next, the Loader. Her runs have, well, extreme consistency. She's busted. That's really all I need to say on it. The largest learning curve for the Loader is figuring out the intricacies of her grappling mechanic, but even if you're not Spider-Manning it quite yet, you'll still be absolutely steamrolling anything in your way. Did a scary enemy just spawn? Just punch it. It really is that simple. Next, Mercenary. His runs have medium consistency. Playing the Mercenary is like putting your heart and soul into a paper, only for the teacher to just give you a little tiny check mark in the top right corner. If you love sweating over every little encounter that you face, then Mercenary is definitely your playstyle. Make sure you land your primary's third swing, as it will apply Expose and allow you to chain into your other abilities more frequently. This isn't as relevant if you're rocking the alternate abilities, as you're then basically a pseudo-ranged survivor. Don't get me wrong, the Mercenary is fun as heck to play, just know that you'll be putting in a ton more effort just to get the same results as you get on another survivor. Next, MUL-T. His runs have high consistency. MUL-T is a less mobile but tankier commando. You just hold down your primary button 99% of the time and occasionally toss in your other abilities, such as when needing to interrupt something. Whichever loadout you choose, you'll have very good levels of damage, and MUL-T does have the highest HP of any survivor, any real survivor, and has 16% damage reduction, increased up to 54% while dual wielding, meaning you'll just need a couple mobility items to mitigate your otherwise sentry turret playstyle. Next, Rex. His runs have high consistency. Once you get over the fear of seeing your HP bar constantly wobble back and forth, Rex will become a lethal tool in getting good runs. Spam your primary and secondary as much as you want, and then use your utility and special whenever your health starts to get too low. There's a bit more nuance than that when playing Rex, but not really. Attack, heal, repeat. If you find your health consistently low, then take a break from using your secondary entirely, or just occasionally weave one in after a primary. Other than that, just keep small enemies like beetles alive to siphon their life with your utility and special, and then go to town on the big guys with your secondary. Next, Railgunner. Her runs have extreme consistency. She's Loader with infinite range, provided you can actually aim. If you can't aim, well, then you better start getting good, brother. But seriously, that is all that's necessary. Sure, Railgunner has a rather slow attack time and no real AoE aside from piercing shots, but that does not make her susceptible to getting swarmed, as she literally one-shots everything aside from bosses themselves. And if you grab some watches, a few crowbars, or an ice and firebend, you'll even be one-shotting those too. Aside from aiming, you'll also want to work on utilizing her mines to their fullest capacity, which involves the momentum from your primary and special abilities. Master your aim and your mobility on the Railgunner, and you'll have some of, if not the easiest runs of your entire life. And finally, Void Fiend. His runs have high consistency. Void Fiend has everything you could possibly want in a single kit. Range, AoE, healing, mobility, burst damage, and a massive stream of damage. I recommend staying in your base form by utilizing your special frequently, as you have much more flexibility in combat and can then save your transformation to be ready immediately for those tougher encounters. And that's all I wanted to cover on playing each survivor. If you're looking for more information, I have a plethora of videos on the different items, survivors, and various other mechanics in Risk of Rain 2. Chances are, if you want it, I probably have it. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/WoolieGaming and consider joining our Discord server as well. Thank you for watching.